The Blood of Dawnwalker is not just giving you a sword in one hand and vampire claws in the other. At least based on what has been confirmed so far, its combat system seems built around something more specific: a man divided. In practical terms, the basic shape is clear. By day, Coen fights with swordplay and ritual hex magic. By night, that shifts into claws, dark powers, supernatural movement, and blood craving. Beneath both sides is a directional melee system built around reading enemy attacks, blocking precisely, and timing counters, with more forgiving Omni attacks and Omni blocks available at a stamina cost. So before getting into the finer details, that is the core answer. Combat is split between Coen's human side and his vampire side, and both are shaped by how much control the player wants to take over each fight. That is the part of the Blood of Dawnwalker's combat that stands out right now. Not simply that Coen has different abilities depending on the time of day, but that those abilities seem tied to the central conflict of the character himself. Human and vampire, control and hunger. A body that becomes more dangerous after sunset, but also less stable. This video is based on confirmed pre-release information, so some systems may change before launch, and some finer details are still not public. So the question for now is not whether the combat is good, we cannot know that yet. The better question is what Rebel Wolves has confirmed, what has only been observed in preview footage, and what kind of combat identity emerges from those pieces. The foundation is Coen himself, and his combat changes with the day and night cycle. During the day, he fights primarily with a sword and magic. The swordplay has been described through the lens of medieval fighting styles, which fits the grounded dark fantasy setting Rebel Wolves has been showing. The language around combat points towards something physical, tactical, and rooted in technique rather than pure spectacle. The magic is specific to Coen's human form magic is ritual based. It is cast by carving runes into his body, which gives the system a harsher texture than a normal spell wheel. This is not magic as clean energy thrown from a distance. At least in concept, it is magic that comes through pain, ritual, and the body itself. One named spell we know about is Compel Soul, which lets Coen speak with the dead. What makes that interesting is that it is not described only as a damage tool. It can open new quest branches. So daytime magic appears to be part of the broader RPG structure, not only something used to clear enemies faster. Then night comes and Coen changes. Vampire Coen fights with claws, dark powers, enhanced strength, supernatural agility, and traversal skills available after sunset. Shadowstep has been specifically named as a skill used to navigate rooftops, and Coen's more parkour-like traversal abilities are tied to becoming a Dawnwalker. Night is not being framed like a cosmetic stance change, it changes what Coen has access to. By day, he has swordplay and ritual magic. By night, those runes seal shut. Magic becomes unavailable, the vampire side takes over, and combat shifts towards claws, powers, movement, and hunger. So the day and night system is not just atmosphere. Time can affect what quests you pursue, but it can also affect how Coen fights once he reaches them. The clearest mechanical identity, though, is the directional combat system. Rebel Wolves has described the melee system as directional, with a focus on studying enemy movement, blocking precisely, and timing counterattacks. The easiest comparison is not a one-to-one match, but the kind of directional melee language you see in something like Kingdom Come Deliverance, which the developers have cited as one of the influences here. Not because Dawnwalker is confirmed to play exactly like Kingdom Come, but because the direction of an attack, the direction of a block, and the timing of your response are all part of the fight. That directional layer is also not the only way to play. There are Omni attacks and Omni blocks. These are more forgiving options that do not require directional input in the same way. So if a player does not want to engage fully with the more strategic side of the combat, the game gives them a more traditional action RPG approach. The trade-off being stamina. Omni attacks and Omni blocks cost stamina, while more precise directional play is described as more efficient. You can use the safer option, but you are spending a resource to do it. Defense follows the same idea. Directional blocking is there for players who want to read attacks more precisely. Omni blocking gives a more forgiving option at a stamina cost. Parrying, counterattacks, and dodging are also part of the defensive toolkit, so the system does not seem built around one answer. Some players may prefer to hold their ground and block, others may prefer to move around attacks and create space. The exact stamina balance could still change before launch, but the basic idea is clear. Precision should be more efficient than relying on the safer option every time. Stamina is not the only resource underneath the fight. Activation charges have also been confirmed. Successful blocks, attacks, and parries can build these charges, which are then spent on active abilities including Hex Magic. That gives combat a build and spend rhythm. You are not only waiting for an ability to come off cooldown. A clean block, a good parry, or a controlled attack can become part of how Coen earns access to stronger active tools. Then there's Blood Craving. This is the resource system that feels most tied to the premise. At night, Coen's hunger intensifies. It has visual cues and it can be managed by drinking blood from defeated foes, innocent villagers, animals, or by using special blood vials. If ignored, it can weaken Coen's abilities and vitality. In critical moments, it can make him lose control. That changes the shape of combat management. Stamina is about effort, activation charges are about momentum, Blood Craving is about control. At night, Coen is not only managing a fight, he is managing himself. Blood Craving also ties into Coen's health and hunger. If he loses health, he can be pushed towards involuntarily feeding on an NPC, which may cut off dialogue options or even entire quest lines. The exact scale of that consequence system is still unknown. The final game will have to show how often those moments happen and how far the consequences can reach, but the idea itself is strong enough to define part of the combat identity. Feeding is not only resource management, it can carry consequence. It can affect who remains available, what conversations are still possible, and how Coen's violence echoes outside of the fight itself. That is where the vampire fantasy becomes more interesting. At night, Coen may be more powerful, but the system is also asking what that power costs. Progression seems to follow the same divide, even if the final menu structure has not been shown in one clean form yet. We know Coen uses a sword in human form and claws in vampire form. We know the game contains multiple weapons and multiple armor sets. There are many types of armor, but no helmets, so gear variety does exist. What has not been fully confirmed is the final list of weapon categories. Public material does not clearly say whether those extra weapons are different sword families, sidearms, found weapons, or something broader. For now, weapon variety is confirmed, but the specifically confirmed combat tools are swords, claws, magic, and vampiric powers. Skill progression is clearer in concept than in presentation. One description presents 4 categories: human perks, vampiric perks, shared perks, and active abilities. A later preview describes 3 main branches: daytime witchcraft, nighttime vampiric powers, and sword fighting that overlaps both, with passive and active upgrades. Those descriptions do not line up perfectly, but they point towards the same broad idea. Progression is split across the human side of Coen, the vampire side, the shared combat layer, and active abilities. A few specific abilities have been described. Compel Soul lets Coen speak with the dead and open quest path. Another ability links enemies together, causing sword strikes to affect all linked targets until the effect ends, after which the primary enemy becomes stronger. Coen spells are also upgradable. Some vampiric abilities are tied to specific vampiric blood as well, meaning Coen can gain mutations or powers by draining other vampires. The final details are still limited, but the direction is clear. Progression is not only about making numbers larger, it appears to be divided across the same parts of Coen that define the entire game: the human, the vampire, and the space between them. Crafting has also been confirmed, but only in a limited form so far. Rebel Wolves has described it as focused on consumables like tinctures or concoctions, with no other form of crafting confirmed yet. One progression detail also connects directly to the larger time pressure of the game. Certain abilities or skill upgrades have been shown with a visible time cost, so at least in the preview build, improving Coen was not only about unlocking power, it also consumed part of the limited 30-day structure. If that carries into the final game, combat progression may not only be about experience points or materials, it may also be about what the player chooses to spend time on. The enemy roster is already broader than vampires. Official material has shown blood guards, kobolds, ancient undead, soglavs, and other creatures tied to Veil Sangora. Kobolds attack in groups and exploit distraction. Ancient undead are framed as former warriors or guardians still carrying that role in death. Soglavs are relentless predators that do not stop once they are locked onto prey. Blood guards serve the Rakiri vampire order. That is not a full enemy design breakdown, but it does suggest the world is not populated by one kind of threat. The combat has to account for swarming creatures, stronger humanoid servants, ruin-dwelling undead, vampires, monsters, and higher-level encounters. Bosses and tougher fights are also confirmed in broad terms. Higher-level zones and bosses have been referenced, and named antagonists like Brensis and Bakir are already part of the revealed material. Sony's preview also described the fight against the Forgotten Guardian, a roaming armored skeleton miniboss in an underground ruin. That preview showed incoming attack markers and rest call indicators for unblockable attacks, but because this comes from preview footage, I will treat those UI details as observed behavior rather than final launch rules. The same caution applies to the full boss structure. The Forgotten Guardian gives us a useful example of what has been shown, but it does not tell us how every major encounter will work. Stealth is also present, but limited in framing. The game has not been described as heavily stealth-focused, but nighttime stealth takedowns are confirmed through vampiric abilities, including jumping down on unsuspecting enemies. So stealth exists as part of the nighttime toolkit, not necessarily as a full stealth sandbox. Difficulty and accessibility are clearer than some other areas. A story mode has been confirmed, with combat described as much more forgiving. There are also harder difficulty parameters and higher level zones or bosses for players who want more challenge. Platform listings mention advanced adjustable difficulty, individual assist, controller remapping, sensitivity and inversion options, and the ability to play without rapid button presses, vibration, or adaptive trigger effects. All of that fits the broader combat design. The game seems built to reward precision without making precision the only way to engage. Directional systems, Omni options, dodging, story mode, and assist settings all point towards a combat model that can have depth without forcing every player into the same rhythm. The remaining unknowns are mostly in the finer combat details. The final weapon categories have not been fully shown, neither have exact lock-on behavior, dodge frame tuning, guard break rules, detailed stat scaling, or how deep post-game combat systems might go. I would also avoid assuming systems like a formal posture meter, dedicated ranged weapon classes, environmental skills, or a named finisher system until Rebel Wolves shows them more clearly. So the broad shape of combat is visible, the exact feel is not. And that is the line this kind of pre-release breakdown has to hold. What makes the combat worth watching is the way these systems appear to press inward from different sides. Directional attacks ask you to read the enemy. Omni blocks give you a safer option, but at a cost. Magic is tied to the human side of Coen, while claws, dark powers, and blood craving belong to the knight. So the combat is not only about what Coen can do, it is about what state he is in, how much control he has left, and what the fight asks him to spend. That is the promise of the Blood of Dawnwalker's combat right now. Not proof that every piece will work, not a final verdict before anyone has played the full game, but a clear enough identity to pay attention to. If Rebel Wolves can make these systems feel as connected in play as they sound on paper, then every fight could reflect the larger struggle of being a Dawnwalker. Not fully human, not fully vampire, and never completely free from the cost of either. If you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more Blood of Dawnwalker content, please drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.